So for this lesson, we're going to be working towards solving trigonometric equations. And the first thing we need to work on is reference angles. So right here I have a question, and this is what all the Delta Math questions will look like. Find an angle in each quadrant that has a common reference angle with, and then this number, which in this case is 192, will be different for each question, from 0 to 360. So first off, these questions, when we talk about reference angles, basically we're talking about an angle between 0 and 90 degrees that's going to have the same properties as this angle when we think about it on the coordinate plane. So we'll draw this out. So first off, once I figure out what quadrant 192 is in, and that's somewhere around here in quadrant 3, that's my answer for quadrant 3. You're going to be filling in these 4 answers on Delta Math. Now to find the reference angle, we're always working back to that bow tie picture or working back to the x-axis. So here I make a little triangle with the x-axis. This is 180 right here. So 192 minus 180 equals 12 degrees. So that is my reference angle. And that is also my quadrant 1 answer, because 12 degrees fits in quadrant 1. So if I was going to draw a triangle in quadrant 1, here's 12 degrees, and the idea, and I know I'm not drawing it perfect, is both of these triangles would have the same proportions and the same trig values. So finding the other 2 quadrants, if I take my 12 degrees and work off the x-axis into the second quadrant, I end up with an angle right here. And to find that angle, if I was going the normal way around in standard position, I would do 180 minus 12, and that would give me 168 degrees. So that is my second quadrant answer. And then lastly, in the fourth quadrant, I'm working off the x-axis, so I'm doing 360 minus the 12. So I'll write that down here, 360 minus 12, and that gives me 348 degrees. So all of these angles all have a common reference angle of 12 degrees. This is the reference angle, that's that angle in the other quadrants. This 0 to 360 is here basically because I could also work with negative angles, or I could go around the circle more than once and get other angles like that. So I'm going to clean this up and put up a new angle to work with, and we'll just work on 2 more of these before you start the homework. So our next angle we're going to work with is 106 degrees. We have the same exact question. So the first thing we're going to do is draw our axes, draw that angle of 106 degrees, and find our reference angle by going down to the x-axis. So here I'm going to do 180 minus 106, because this is 180 down here, and that's 74. So my reference angle is 74. I could have done this first. My 106 is my second quadrant angle, and now I'm going to use my 74 to get into the third and the fourth quadrant. So 180 plus 74 equals 254. I'll just highlight my answer so it doesn't get lost in the picture. And then 360 minus 74 equals 286. So our next example is 306 degrees, and at this point, if you didn't already, I really suggest pausing the video and trying this one, and then you can check with me. Okay, so I'll start working through this one. Hopefully you've paused already. So 306 is in the fourth quadrant. So that is my fourth quadrant angle. Now we're going to find our reference angle. In the fourth quadrant, we go back to the x-axis this way. This is 360, so 360 minus 306 equals 54. That is my reference angle. It's also my first quadrant angle here. So working on the other two quadrants, if I want to get into the second quadrant, I need to go this way, and the third quadrant, I need to go this way. So this is 180 minus 54, which is going to give me 126 degrees. And this is 180 plus 54, which is going to give me 234 degrees. So just a couple notes about this. If I started with an acute angle here, such as, I don't know, 75 maybe, that would just go right into the first quadrant, and I'd actually get to skip the step of finding the reference angle because I already have the reference angle. So since that's easier, I didn't do one of those, but hopefully you get the idea. And what we're doing here basically is we're going to be solving equations, but when you solve trig equations, because there's all these similar spots with triangles that look the same, when we solve them, we don't really get one answer, we get multiple answers. So there'll be more to that. It has to do with ASTC, but we'll get to that in the next lesson. One other question I can imagine you guys having if you were in class is why do we go off the x-axis? And basically, if we went off the y-axis or we drew it somewhere in the middle, these y values wouldn't correspond to the opposite side of the triangle. The x values wouldn't correspond to the adjacent side of the triangle, and then we wouldn't have any sort of consistency in comparing those triangles. So this is the way it's defined. We always build off the x-axis.